As it is with the final episode of most sports shows, the last episode of Cinderella Nine doesn't do a lot story-wise. Instead, what it does is present the best animated episode of the series. This is truly the first time when the number of good action shots outnumbered the number of bad action shots. And it got to a point where I could just relax and watch the show and not try to nitpick any of the animation. Now, as I was going through this episode, I noticed a lot of the shots were used in the original trailer before the series had started, which makes me think that this episode is an episode that the production team had been working on for a pretty long time. It's entirely possible that they already had it in the bank before they started animating anything else, which is probably the reason why this episode looks so much better in comparison to the rest of the series. So it starts out with Seijo tying the score in the bottom of the second. And then the teams trade places with runs. Sato doesn't give up, and indeed they make it up by taking a 2-1 lead. And then Iwaki hits a home run. I think it's the only home run of the series that we've seen so far, and it is genuinely exciting. It's a really gorgeously animated sequence, and the first time I was watching the show where I actually felt some sort of hype from a baseball scene happening. What the home run does is also bring us into the perspective of Seijo. The whole team gathers around their pitcher, their leader, their captain, and the side story for this team is that their pitcher revived the team out of the grave essentially to try to reestablish their program as one of the premier girls baseball programs in the country. It's a story that's pretty similar to Tsubasa's in that she was the one who had to hustle to make sure that the administration approved, to make sure that they had all the funds needed, and to make sure they had enough people to gather a baseball team. And in the realm of this story, it's not a necessary moment. There's nothing about the team that enlightens us to any of the characters that we care about the most. But it's still an important part of this show because it demonstrates that even the team that we consider the antagonist has a lot of hurdles to go through in order to get to the point where they are at. And it's demonstrating that girls baseball is still going through a lot of trouble, and people who want to play it have to jump through a lot of hoops. They have a lot to overcome. Even the best teams with the best players still aren't perceived to be as respected as the boys' baseball teams. So as the game continues, the second baseman Asada gets injured, which allows Kawakita to come into play. She's one of the original players, and it's nice to see her get some action. And we also see a pitching change, which brings our first baseman onto the mound. I forget her name, but she does a pretty good job. And this show does the whole last episode montage thing, where the last few innings are showed via stills and some pretty good music. The animation is really good. It gave me a lot of the warm fuzzies. This was the first time I kind of felt nostalgic watching this show, and I kind of miss that it is going away. So the montage fades out, and we find out that Sato actually beats Seijo in the first round, but then loses in the second round. Them advancing past the first round in their first year of existence whips up a lot of excitement around the school. And the final scene shows some new recruits being brought to watch the baseball team. I really like the final moment of this show when this girl with glasses is very shy and not wanting to join the team, but also feels some sort of attraction to it. And Tsubasa reaches out her hand and says, "Come play baseball with us." And that's really the ethos of this show. It's all about Tsubasa's perspective of everyone getting a chance to play, regardless of their skill level, regardless of their knowledge of the game. If you have an interest in playing, if you have a desire, you deserve to be on the field. I find this a very healthy perspective. I find it a very novel perspective for most sports anime that like to pursue the idea of winning at all costs. And I'm very glad that the conclusion of the show matched the ethos of Tsubasa throughout. And yet I can't help but think that I'm left with an overall sense of disappointment. Not because I think this ending is bad. I think it's a really good and solid ending to the show. But because the last episode was so good that it left me thinking the show had a lot of promise. It had a really, really bad mid-season lull. There were many times throughout where I would not have blamed anyone for dropping the show based on how hideously ugly it looks. But if every episode just looked like this last episode, it probably would have gained some mainstream credibility, or at least some fans outside of this niche corner of YouTube. Overall, I think it's really good, and I don't know if I would really recommend it to anyone unless they're really into cute girls doing sports things. So I'll probably need some time to sit on it before coming to an overall conclusion, but I have positive feelings about this show. And anyone who dropped it midway through the series, I don't blame them, but I do recommend you watch this last episode. It's pretty clearly the best of the series and a very, very fitting conclusion to what I think is a worthwhile show to watch. Needless to say, this will be the last episode of the Nine cast. I highly doubt there will be a second season of this ever produced. And as such concludes the best season of baseball anime in recent memory.